welcome everybody to this Design at Large. We're our third speaker today. So as a reminder before introducing Amy, for those of you who are taking this as for credit as a class, there is a form you are supposed to sign on your way out. And so a lot of you already signed that, which is okay. Please stay, of course, for the whole talk. So Amy Alexander is going to talk today to us. So she's an artist. She is associate professor in the visual art department here at UCSD, but she is much more than that. Her background is in music, is in visual media, but is also in programming. So she is, in her work, she's mixing up a lot of technology-based knowledge with, her artist vein. She has a couple of very interesting names. She calls herself Mad Artist, and also Uber, or I would say Uber Geek.
Uber Geek.
But people here say Uber probably. Her work has been, exhibited in public art, in the museum. I just noted here a couple of examples. The Whitney Museum, Ars Electronica. She had worked at SIGGRAPH, on the streets of a variety of cities around the world. And it's been really, interesting to see the kind of things that Amy has been, developing and creating over the years. I met Amy a few years ago, I think. I don't even know if you remember. We were trying to, get a new project. It was kind of an intersection with technology and art. It was called UB Sketch, and she was one of our very, very early tester of this system. And it happens to me all the time that when I get into arts with technology, I always bump into people that are really interesting at this intersection. And I bumped into Amy again a couple of years ago when one of my students in the visual arts department started to work on some interactive technology and art. And it's been a really interesting conversation, so I am convinced, I'm sure today is going to be a very, very interesting talk. And I let Amy introduce what she's going to talk about. So let's welcome Amy today.
All right, so I've got, as usual, I've prepared, enthusiastically prepared more than I can possibly fit in. So I'm going to skip over some things and go quickly over some other things. But if you see something that I glossed over that you want to know more about, ask me when we get to the Q&A. So without further ado, let's see if this works. Oh, yeah, already I'm in trouble. It's it's not the first slide. So let's go back to the first slide. There we go. All right, here, this will be much better.
Still in your own world. The year is 2071.
And Dennis Patrick take you into a world beyond belief, where a season's growth can be condensed into seconds. Variable light becomes a seductive melodic symphony. And the Loom Accord, the love machine, gives sensuous stimulation that conditions both men and women to a fuller, richer life of love. This is the world of the force field barrier. The laser pulse beam.
All right, so now that I have your attention with the sexy portion of the show, okay, so what that thing was, I'm going to start actually showing you the scene from the movie that thing is in. I'll turn it down a little. Okay, so that thing in this movie, they call it a Loom Accord. In real life, it is the Lumograph. It is was built by Oskar Fischinger, a German abstract animator who came to the United States, and among other things, he worked on Fantasia but left the project, and has a fascinating history. But he started building this thing in the 1940s, and then it appears here in this is a 1964 movie, obviously a top quality B movie that takes place, sci-fi movie, takes place in the world of 2071. But what I think is interesting, so they basically licensed this thing from Oskar for apparently $50 to use it in the movie. He and later his wife and daughter used to actually perform this. And I should explain, this garbagey keyboard down there, that's not part of it. The real Loom Accord is this rubber screen, and what you did is you took your hands and you pushed through the rubber screen, and another part of the Loom Accord projected color light on it. The rest of it is, what she's playing is just a prop for the movie. But I thought it was kind of interesting that it gets used in this movie, and that it plays this part of this sort of functional thing, right? It's used to make people fall in love and have sex and reproduce in this scenario of the future, because it kind of sheds light on this idea of, art projects. Do they have a use? If they have a use, are they a weird use? But also because it's a wacky invention. So what I'll be talking about today is wacky inventions and their place in the world, how we think of them as research, but not just any wacky inventions. In particular, what I call unmovie machines, visual instruments, including my own, and we'll talk about kind of how they're working, and not just technically, but in this sort of very important role of what is the role of the wacky invention in the world and in research. Okay, so a little more about the Lumograph, the real project that he had made. And by the way, if you go to Center of Visual Music's website, they have a film of Elfriede Fischinger, Oskar's wife, playing this instrument. And you can see it kind of looks the same. It's played silent, doesn't have cheesy organ music, doesn't have that cheesy keyboard, but it has that same look. On the left is one of Oskar's diagrams of it, which I'm not so concerned about you seeing really the details, but just the idea of him, kind of sketching this out. Basically shows his system of, here's how you put the sheet, here's how you put your hands, here's how the light projects. But also, I find it interesting to look at kind of the notes people make and how they looked at their own inventions. So he's kind of looking at this and saying, from the new color play instrument, a new invention by Oskar Fischinger. It's played by hand and makes the most fantastic color display, but controlled directly through the player, right? So the performer is very important to him, and also he sees this as a fantastic invention. So this color play instrument, it actually falls in a whole genre of visual instruments called color organs. A lot of people hear the word color organ and they think of something. There were things in the 70s where, a light automatically moved to a color, or various things have been called color organs. The kinds we're talking about are audiovisual performance instruments, and they date back to 1740. Ish, of course. A Jesuit priest named Father Castell proposed the first known one in 1740. In other words, he wrote about it, and accounts differ whether this was actually built, actually performed. There's a story of it trying to ship it to London for a performance, but under 18th century fire restrictions, the fire marshal wouldn't let it go because, of course, it was played with candles in those days, generating the light. So this tradition of making color organs really took off in the 20th century with the rise of electricity. As you can imagine, the older sun and candle versions were a little bit unwieldy. This is Thomas Wilfred on the left, and as well on the right. And I really only want to show you this slide because in the middle it's going to move ever so slightly. He was one of several early 20th century color organ inventors. His color organ he invented was called the Clavilux, and on the right was a home version he made because he was very interested in how do you market this fabulous art project that you've made. So he decided, well, I can make like this mini version and I'll sell it to home users and everyone will want one of these things in their home. And in the middle you can see what it looks like. The reason you can see this, there's like film of this thing, is because some of these Clavilux Juniors on the right, some of them actually have survived until modern day. They were played with like a wax disc, and so people are actually able to like basically boot them up and play them and take films of them. One of Thomas's contemporaries was Mary Haluk Greenewalt, and she came from Syria, and she immigrated as a child to Philadelphia, which happens to be my home city, which is one of the reasons I became interested in her. And the other is, of course, that she was one of the few women working in this field, or at least one of the few women we know about working in this field. You can imagine it was kind of tough being a female artist inventor in the 19-teens, 20s, 30s, when she was doing most of her work. She was trained as a pianist and then kind of figured out some of these engineering skills that she would need to build her color play instrument, which she called a sarabet. And although she was a pianist, the instrument wasn't really performed like a piano. It's really kind of hard to tell in the picture, but they're sort of more giant levers that she's pushing on. And a side project I have is visiting her archive in the Philadelphia Historical Society of Pennsylvania, where she always throughout her life felt very insecure about how she would be remembered. Again, you know, sort of as a woman in this field, she went through various problems of having her work acknowledged. There's one story which I've not been able to independently confirm of her having a patent suit rejected because the judge said that a woman couldn't have possibly invented something so sophisticated. So she always was setting out to make sure people knew that she did this thing and she did this thing first. And one of the things she did was plan to donate her archive to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. And so she meticulously saved like all of these programs and notes and litigation and everything. And there's just piles and piles of this at HSP. So one of my side projects is sort of trying to make a lot of these available to the public online who may not have a chance to travel to Philadelphia. So basically, I photograph these, and Historical Society of Pennsylvania allows you to photograph things, put them online as long as you credit them. So I take these rather horrible photos, but they give some insights into what she's doing. So that's why you see these kind of sketchy framings of these. This one says in the left margin, first instrument used in Wildwood Concert, 1919, note homemade rheostat. So she was developing these custom rheostats, light dimmers for the color organs, and then she patented some of them because she was always trying to figure out, well, you know, how do I make this thing how do I make money off of this thing? How do I get this thing out into the world? How do I publicize it? So one of the things she did was like patent things that she had done in the hopes of having them have other uses and take off. So she often ended up going into court, and there's actually a book that you can get about what her patents are. And Here's a program from one of her performances on her light instrument. So you can see she goes, she's very much into how to promote this. These will eventually be in every theater because she was trying to get these picked up by both regular theaters and also movie theaters. And this is one of her notes with her scrapbook. This is an important collection of data in the life's work of the above who created the fine art of light color play used as a means of human expression. And this is a score, a musical score for one of her light color play performances or compositions in which different hash mark patterns represent different colors, and you can see there's sort of crescendos and decrescendos. So the art of light color play, she called it Norathar, and she was very deliberate that this was not the art of color and pitch mapping. A lot of color organ developers were very attached to the idea that, orange is C sharp and D is yellow, and then somebody else would be like, orange is red and D is maroon, and they were attached to these color and pitch mappings, and she was very dedicated to the idea that no, there should not be a correspondence, and she was very interested in the art of expressive light performance, like music is expressive sound performance, and so she felt that she had invented that idea, and she called that Norathar. Thomas Wilfred as well thought he had invented that idea. Various people have, but this was kind of another thing, this idea of, okay, I have to get not only this object out, but this abstract thing, this art form. And if anybody's interested in what I've got so far they're basically Flickr groups for now, and I have a Facebook group. But moving on from Mary and color organs, we fast forward 50 years to analog video synthesizers. So by the 1960s, analog audio synthesizers were being developed, and video artists got the idea that, hey, we could develop these too. One such developer is Dan Sandine, who's actually now a researcher at Qualcomm Institute. In those days, he was based in Chicago. He created the Sandine IP standing for image processor, and he open sourced it, which in the 1970s meant that he made the plans available to anybody. So somebody could write away to him in the mail and say, hey, I want to build an IP, how do I do it? And he would send you the schematics. One person that did that was Phil Morton, who actually, he was also in Chicago, so he probably didn't have to write away in the mail, but Phil Morton, who was a video artist, and he made a film called Colorful Colorado, which, for reasons of time, I won't show the film, but gives you an idea of what these video synthesizers could do. They could colorize video and perform various contrast effects. Nowadays, it seems like, oh, well, I can just do that in, After Effects or even Final Cut, but you couldn't do it in those days, and in fact, some of the things that these systems did, you still can't do. So we've talked about solo artists up until this point. Want to touch on one of the few instances of visual artists performing collaboratively. It's kind of a weird thing. Like musicians, they've been performing collaboratively forever. Visual artists hardly ever do this, which could be a reason for a PhD dissertation, I'm sure. There's various reasons, both practical and social, I think. But in the late 1960s, light shows were emerging, and again, it's one of these terms that means more than one thing. So light shows here doesn't mean like you go to the concert and they have different lights going down, but light shows as collaborative visual performance. And again, it's one of these things, there's very little film documentation in this case because it was actually very hard to film light shows, right? They don't, if you took a film of this stuff being projected, you couldn't see it very well. So what I'm about to show you is one of the few films of a light show that exists, and for weird reasons, the group Single Wing Turquoise Bird, which was based in Los Angeles, was asked to portray a light show in a film. So this film has this entirely unrelated plot about this woman who has a baby for another couple, and everybody smokes pot and stuff, but they needed a light show. So it's the real light show in a fictional film. Okay, so I'll turn down the sound because, well, it is down. So what you're seeing are those rotating wheels, which were on the slide. Those are doing strobing and color strobing so that they can get a flicker effect. And those are in front of film projectors. This is somebody with a plate of colored liquids, and they're taking that on an overhead projector, and that is then being projected on the screen. And all of these guys, because it was all guys in those days, these guys were performing collaboratively, projecting on the screen at the same time. And this is one reason visual artists don't perform collaboratively that much, because guess what happens when you project many things at the same time? You would, by default, get a white screen, right? So it's hard to do this. You have to figure out, okay, I'm going to be in black except for this one little part. Okay, now I'm going to do something. And they have to really kind of communicate in real time, improvise how they're going to do this so that you don't just wash out to white. So obviously this is a pot smoking section. It's, see if I can move it along past this seductive pot smoking back to the light show. Okay, see that there's the wheels a little bit there. That's what color wheel. He's not strobing it right now. Looks like maybe he's going to start, and about a few seconds it comes back. There we go. Okay, so they're going to cut back to it. There we go. So now you get to finally see a little bit of what the light show would look like. And this music that was in the movie, you know, did not match it. So actually, the way this was shot, they actually shot layer by layer and then composited it. The film production company actually did that, put it together, but with the supervision of somebody that was actually in the light show, so that it actually looked like something that they had done. So you see various things. Computer graphic images that were shot onto transparencies, and then make a film out of that. Just basically very fast flipping through that. Still slides and the liquids. So this light show actually still exists sometimes. One of its members, Michael Scroggins, was my advisor in grad school. Oh, there he is now, but that's 50 years ago. And they actually, every once in a while, they reunite. Some of them are no longer with us, but they reunite. They have some new members, some of whom are female, and they will still perform. Okay, so that is a direct predecessor to what we now know as the art of VJing. Okay, so people in a club, a rave or something, doing these visuals, and they kind of look like this. You can kind of see some similarities, only the music has changed. Well, a lot has changed, of course. But when we look at this, we go, okay, I see some performers on stage. I'm not sure if they're the DJs or the VJs. I see some knob twiddling. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. And that's one of the motivations for my work, is that digital performance, we often, you know, we're twiddling, we're typing and so on, and the performativity kind of disappears. So with that kind of motivation, bringing it to my days as a sweaty rocker. So there I am in the 1980s. And you can tell I was a very convincing rock star up there with Mickey Mouse and my white overalls. And but when I studied music, both classically and as a rocker, I was always very, you know, well, kind of bad at kind of the physical gestures, but I knew the importance of them. So that transitions to Vijay Uber Geek. Okay, so here I am, and I'm already older than this. This has been 10, 15 years old. But I play this character. I wear this little sci-fi silver vest, and I have usually some instruments, which are computer peripherals strapped to me. On the left, you can see me at a club show that I performed with. I'm on the left with DJ Donamaya on the right. So my character is kind of this geek but rock star, right? Because I'm interested in that juxtaposition, and maybe I'm also a part robot. I perform this at both clubs, festivals, occasionally on the street, and even art openings. So you'll see some of my Geek Toys that I perform with in this clip. So I'm holding a kind of a remote control, basically just acts as the mouse, but it lets me kind of be physical, because, you know, where you might play a guitar like this, I at least get to do that. And that's just basically my mouse. The Dance Dance Revolution pad, which also controls visuals. Sometimes I use a gamepad. You can say I'm quite the dancer there. And the strapped-on keyboard. I'm not the first visual artist to do the strapped-on keyboard thing. Let's see, Alexei Shulgin, I think some others have also done strapped-on keyboards. There's my gamepad. And the content of this is Google queries. So there's actually a little narrative of Google queries that goes on. I write a query, something like, and all I wanted, right? These sort of first-person queries. And the results, I used to, way back when, I used to do them live. Now I do curated, canned results, but they're all real Google results. And there are these texts of kind of things people talk about. Because one of the things I'm interested in is also like the division between public and private space and where they overlap. The internet is one of those things people get on and start confessing things on forums and so on that are sort of private and sort of public. And, you know, and I'm in this position of someone who's reading it and using it, but I'm also sort of voyeuristic, right? And so there's kind of this uncomfortable space. And there's basically a very loose narrative, because I don't know if people are coming and going, whether they're drinking, whether they're on drugs, but sort of this loose narrative, the way song lyrics are a loose narrative, that develops over across the show. So fast forward again to my latest and current project. This one I'm working on with Kurt Miller, who's a recent doctoral recipient from the School of Music, and had some other collaborators. Wojciech Kozma from Germany worked on it for a while. So when I was working on Cyberspace Land, and I've performed this thing for like 15 years now, I guess. And I find that when I'm rehearsing, getting ready for a show, and I'm rehearsing, and I'm just kind of getting into the groove in my studio, and I'll find myself kind of scratching along to music on the touchpad, right? So of all of these like interfaces that I've made, these physical interfaces I've made for this, to some degree they're all a failure, because the thing that I do when I'm not thinking about it is I scratch away at the scratch pad. And I make these rhythmic patterns, because the instrument that I kind of played and the longest and still play is percussion. So it's just intuitive, like I'm half asleep and I'm doing this. And so I started to think, okay, maybe I should actually make a piece that I really kind of focus on that. So that became the percussive image gestural system. I'll start playing the video and I'll talk over it, which will be rude because you won't hear that much of Kurt's music. Basically, the way this works is, and I again made it sort of for improvisation. So Kurt and I developed these loose compositions. We developed the content, but we're improvising in concert. And I have four, at the present time I think I have, well, 3 iPads really, a Leap Motion controller, and a set of MIDI drums. And the idea is I can do that scratching gesture either on the iPads or with my Leap Motion, right? So I can improvise that as Kurt's playing the clarinet, but then I can also use the drums as percussion. So the idea there is, again, this sort of improvisational impulsivity. One thing that interests me in software and instruments is they always sort of assume a very focused, well-controlled, user, right? When people are really kind of, scatterbrained, dysfunctional, angry, emotional, all that stuff, right? And just like kind of the sweaty rock star that I almost was, I want to be able to kind of impulsively bang out on the drums. Not that percussionists bang out, and like all of my percussion teachers from way back when would hate to hear me say that, but hey, you want to be able to, you want to get a little punk with it. We're not there yet. That's why this is still work in progress. But we got some speed here at least. There you can. It's a little dim here, but you can sort of can't really see. Oh, there it goes. So in the video, it's actually just fading back and forth to the screen. So the transition between these two types of playing, on the surface and on the drums, is that when you make a drawing on the surfaces, the points that you've drawn get memorized by the system. And then when you strike that drum again, it will play back those points with some sort of a variation, right? Meaning it pays attention to your dynamics. It can pay attention to, meaning how hard you hit the drum, how loud it is. It can pay attention to the sound in the room and various other things. And if you're playing faster, it has to compensate for that. It has to play back faster, which we found was actually a very interesting and difficult research problem to solve, because the way you perceive these animations playing back, if something has to be fast and you play back all of these points, it's no longer perceived as fast, even if it is. So that's kind of some of the problems that we're still working on. This was our debut performance at CalIT Qualcomm Institute last September. And I guess I won't go into the sound, but Kurt does some interesting things with looping and live clarinet, and sometimes tape recorders, and sometimes he loops things through the clarinet. So that's our current work. How can we make a more playable, improvisable, and emotional musical instrument? And I'm going to just really quickly go through this one just as a machine, because I think it doesn't tie in as directly as some of the others. So this was the Surveillance Video Entertainment Network with Wojciech Kozma, Vincent Robot, who was a PhD student in computer science, computer vision at the time. And this was a software art project. We did some public space performances in a van, and others, other times it was actually in museums, but it was always done as surveillance. So the idea came from, we started in 2005, so still kind of recently, post 9/11, people very concerned about surveillance and that we don't know, oh gosh, we're being watched all the time. And I thought, well, what's really interesting is we don't know how we're being watched. It's not that we don't know when, but we also don't know how, because we hear things about these digital systems. Oh gosh, it can tell when you're, when you're being a shoplifter. Oh, it's gonna, it filters out all people of a certain ethnicity maybe, or we didn't know what it did, and the fact that we didn't know what it did made it scary. And I became interested. This is sort of one of these databases of that are used to train computer vision systems. It's a pretty old one by now. But I became interested in sort of the mistakes, you know, like it mixed up these two guys, I guess because their facial hair, and these two guys were just kind of both making this like, you know, pouty face, right? Like, and even though they looked nothing like each other and seemed to not even be the same ethnicity, that confused the system. And so we started thinking about like, okay, you can build a system that does what you want it to do. Maybe it's got an attitude director. So we figured if you could have a computer vision technology, it would detect when you looked undesirable, like you were a terrorist or a shoplifter. We'd make one for when you look desirable. So we made one that does rock star detection. So it would be installed in a public place, appearing to be a normal CCTV surveillance system, but instead it would track rock star characteristics. It would have a database of rock stars and their characteristics, and it would change the boring surveillance video into exciting music videos. Some of the characteristics we used: dress. If you're wearing all black, you must be Bono. If you've got blonde hair, you have to be Kurt Cobain. And if you're pouty, you have to be Johnny, my favorite member of Radiohead. Those were a few of the characteristics, but there was a larger database of rock stars and music videos. And it looked something like this. This was when it was in the Whitney Museum, which is, you know, sort of a public space, right? You expect to see art there, but we made sure that we put it where people didn't usually know they were on camera, which was coming out of the restroom is where we put it. And so the monitors were up in the lobby. The reason you see it pulsing is because it's being shot with this DV cam and difference in refresh rates. It doesn't really pulse in real life. Oh, I killed it. Come back. Let's see if I can fast forward past the part that you already saw. Okay, downstairs, there's a camera. On with the show. I think it's triggering on her glasses. It didn't do a good job of telling sunglasses and regular glasses apart. So if you had regular glasses on, you tended to become Bono because he had sunglasses. So I'll go through that one a little bit fast. But I think one of the interesting things about it from, how does it fit in here, is it's one of these things that end up having a use. Not that anybody has a rockstar detection system installed in their public place, but we were able to get the funding for Vincent Robos' work. He spent a year kind of developing these algorithms because we were funded through, at the time, CalIT, because this research in these unusual characteristics that we were able to detect about people was actually useful to the general field of computer vision. So it was another one of these sort of, okay, it's a wacky invention, but it kind of also has this like weird utility to it. Okay, so we're bringing this to the whole, how do we get to the future? Because the title of the talk being The Future is Dead, Long Live the Future. So here's where that came from. Now, we already had this next project in the works at the time, but I think this in 2011, this sort of codified my whole thinking about what we were doing at the time and what, you know, I'm doing in general a lot of the times. And that was Steve Jobs died. And there was all of this press, right, about, you know, he was the last of the single inventors, the inventive genius, and this is now the death of the future. There's no more future. And these articles would come out and say, you know, oh, you know, kind of critically looking at that thinking, but also acknowledging it that, you know, oh gosh, 2011 is also the last flight of the space shuttle, and it feels like we can't do things anymore. So we felt like the future had died, and part of the reason was the wacky inventor in the garage can't seem to really make an impact in the world anymore. You need a big think tank at a university, or better yet, at a corporation. You need lots of money, and you know, it's 2011, there's a recession, nobody has any money, so we can't, you know, we can't invent anything anymore. So I started thinking about, like, well, what did they do during the Depression? I guess they didn't invent anything then either. And I quickly learned that actually during the Depression, they invented all sorts of stuff. It was actually a pretty good decade for technology. And why not? Because, you know, look at the great stuff that you might make if you were a wacky inventor in the 30s. So this is from 1932. Ideas for making money, there it is. The sea bicycle on balloons. Or that thing. That would be, yeah, that Miracle on the Hudson thing would have gone much more smoothly had they had that. Water polo, anyone? And oh, the ski car, who needs snow tires? And then, oh wait, that's 2007, that wacky invention. You ever see those like duck boats, the tourist things? It's like, it goes on land and it goes in the water. So like, oh, I guess 2007 invented something. Oh wait, no, that's actually, those duck boats are amphibious World War II vehicles that have been either refurbished or rebuilt. So that was actually a military invention. The amphibious vehicle, now known as a duck boat. So again, a wacky invention that was actually practical when they made it. Okay, so, but I like to go back a little farther to the 19th century. Oscar Lilienthal's flapping glider. So he was, remember when you were a kid and you read about the Wright Brothers? Maybe you didn't, but I always had to read about the Wright Brothers and how they, you know, they invented the first plane after all of these people before them, you know, made all of these dumb mistakes. They made these, they tried to flap their wings, and you always saw these movies of people crashing and stuff. And to the victors go the spoils. The Wright Brothers did it right. But I always kind of liked that guy, the flapping gliders. But I also liked his 19th century contemporaries who made movie machines, like the Zoetrope, which was basically a bunch of animated images, still images, one slightly different from the next, put inside a cylinder, spun around real fast. You look through a slit and it looks like they're moving. Or some of these other sort of peep show machines. This is called the Mutescope, and it's basically a giant flip book, right? Or a giant Rolodex. It flips through, and you look, this guy has a seedy expression on his face because he's watching this girl dance. So it's peep show in the sense, you know, that you're peeping at something, but also it's a little bit, some of these were a little bit seedy. And they had these vaudevillian dancers in them a lot of times, right? Because in the 19th century, vaudeville had just kind of, was still popular, right? So these ideas of people dancing directly for the viewer were adapted straight into the peep shows. And so in that thinking, we built the Discotrope, the secret nightlife of solar cells. And I'll just let the video explain this project. It's a solar-powered projection system that allows videos to choreograph their own movement. I'm going to skip through these and just bring you straight to the video. So while the early days of cinema brought us these people dancing directly at the camera, YouTube also brings back that same kind of feeling, dancing directly for the viewer in the private space of your own peep show, I mean computer and or iPhone. So we glued, and by we, I mean my poor collaborator Anina Roost had to glue disco ball mirror-sized solo panels onto the center of this disco ball in these concentric rings and hook them up to the motor. Then we pointed projectors, video projectors at it. And the more light was coming from the video projector, the faster the ball would turn. So if you had a video of somebody dancing, the light keeps changing, and that sort of allows the movement of this ball, and thus the reflections on the wall, to keep moving at different speeds. Now, of course, that only kind of works, so the performer can cheat this by flashing white and black lights at it. So the content of the Discotrope shows were these older films. Right? We had these people that were kind of a certain type. They're, you know, the lovely lady or the strong man performing for the camera. As well as some newer things. So you can't see it very well, but that is could be a transgender person, but I think it's actually that's actually a man in women's clothing, and this person, I'm not sure. But these are people that are clearly crossing the traditional boundaries of gender and beauty. And so that was very interesting to us, kind of these juxtapositions. And a bird lady dance. So I'm going to fast forward this a little so you can see what it actually looked like in performance.
Introducing Discotrope, the secret nightlife with solar cells. It's a solar-powered cinematic sensation, guaranteed to make your head spin. So without further ado, let's disco. Trove.
Okay, so yeah, so it has a dramatic ending, but we agreed at the time not to put that in the documentation, so I guess I'll keep that a secret, how the show's ended. But how the slideshow ends is Back to the Future with Otto Lilienthal. And there's his flapping glider again. And there's the Wright Brothers a few years later with the world's first fully controllable aircraft, which a lot of people don't know. They actually were reading about what Otto was doing. They were in the United States, he was in Germany, but they were reading about his experiments, and they kind of used his research in developing their plane, which always worked perfectly. Not. But I'll just remind you that wacky inventions sometimes do work. And there's Otto. That thing, I never knew this, that thing actually worked. He was able to glide with that thing. So wacky projects do sometimes fly. And that's it. Any questions?